and thank you to all of you for joining us today for the presentation on EPA's Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. I'm Kathy Pope. I'm the Development Director and a Community Outreach Manager for the Environmental Protection Network. And if you're not familiar, we're a volunteer network of over 650 EPA alumni who work with our 11 community outreach staff across the country to provide pro bono technical assistance to frontline and environmental justice communities on both public health and environmental issues, and also accessing federal funding. We are super fortunate to be longtime partners with the Anthropocene Alliance, led by the amazing Harriet Festing, who many of you probably know, and her staff and their coalition of frontline community partners who are working for climate and environmental justice. So we've gotten together to co-host these monthly virtual discussions focused on federal funding and other topics that hopefully will be of interest, and are always open to your suggestions for topics as well. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about EPA's Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. It's a mouthful, but it's a fantastic opportunity. You may be aware that EPA recently selected 11 Environmental Justice Thriving Community grant makers who will each be receiving $50 million to serve as pass-through entities for $40 million nationwide through subgrants to community-based nonprofits and other eligible subrecipients for assessment, planning, and project development activities. So the goal is really to alleviate much of the burden that the federal grant process places on small, more resource-constrained community-based organizations. And I know that Harriet and the A2 team have been working with their members to begin thinking about and preparing for this opportunity. And actually, EPN has just provided some initial funding to help create 2 AI modules to assist frontline communities. This is a bit of an experiment for us, but we're really hoping that it will help communities not only create, based on A2's template, an organizational overview that could be used for any funding opportunity, but also hopefully grant maker proposals, hopefully really succinct and strong descriptions of their work and eventual proposals. So we're going to be sending out more information about that widely as the project progresses. It's in the very early stages. But today we're really, really fortunate to be joined by 3 representatives from some of the chosen grant makers. Our first presenter is going to be Jumana Vasi, who serves as the Region 5 Minneapolis Foundation Thriving Communities Grantmaker Program Manager. She supports the collaborative that includes the Midwest EJ Network, Indian Collective, REAMP, and the Minneapolis Foundation. She's also the principal at Vasi Consulting, and her projects have included managing the small grants program for the Midwest EJ Network and providing water policy support to We the People of Detroit and conducting strategic research for philanthropy. We're also very fortunate to have Dr. Daniela Pineda, who is the Program Director for Research Triangle Institute's National Grantmaker Program. They also serve as the Region 4 Grantmaker, and she leads RTI's Center for Equity and Social Justice Research within the Transformative Research Unity for Equity. And Dr. Pineda's work in environmental justice focuses on forming partnerships with community-based organizations to ensure that local knowledge informs science and that communities benefit from their participation in research. And also from RTI, we are joined by Dr. Christine Bevc, who is the Deputy Program Director for RTI's Grantmakers Program. She brings nearly 20 years of experience in applied public health and working with CBOs to identify barriers and facilitators to program success. And most recently, she managed the application review and decision-making process under the National Institute of Health's Long COVID Recovery Initiative. So thank you all for being with us today to provide some insights into this program and help organizations as they are beginning to think about and preparing proposals for this opportunity. After all of our presenters speak, we'll open the floor for questions. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to you, Jumana. I think you should be able to share your screen and your slides.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kathy. And yes, let me share my slides and we'll get started. So hello, everybody. Great to be here with you. Okay, are you able to see the full screen, folks? Okay, great. Okay, I'm Jumana. Thank you for that warm introduction and welcome. I'm really pleased to be here with you all today. And as Kathy noted, I represent the Region 5 or Great Lakes Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. Partners include Minneapolis Foundation, Midwest Environmental Justice Network, NDN Collective, and REAMP Network. So the way our partnership works is that the Minneapolis Foundation is handling the fiscal management, grant making systems, program oversight and evaluation. And our partners are focused on outreach and technical assistance and support to Native American Indigenous communities, rural and remote communities, and urban disadvantaged and environmental justice communities. We are in the process of finalizing our contract with the EPA, and so this is near final information that we have for you, and there might be a couple of pieces that are still up in the air, but this is our first time sharing this with a large audience. So I welcome your questions and am excited to let you know what we know so far. Wanted to point out that Region 5 is these 6 states here that you've noted that are noted in blue. That includes Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. And the dots that you see on the map here are representative of some of our 35 federally recognized tribal nations. And that's what our region covers. Our program goal is to distribute $40 million in grants that we have to distribute over 3 years. It's to make sure that we distribute them well across the region and provide technical support to strengthen the capacity of communities and help them address environmental and public health challenges. I wanted to share some definitions with you real quick. These are the EPA's definitions, essentially. Environmental justice, I don't think I need to share that with this audience. And the way that the EPA is defining disadvantaged communities is sort of specific. We can share more details about that, but in particular, I want to point out that it's about those communities that have been systematically denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic, social, and civil life.
We're seeing your entire slides. We're not seeing the full screen. We see your
Oh, okay.
slides.
All right. Oh, thank you for telling me this. I'm going to stop sharing, I guess. I have 2 screens here, so apparently it's showing my other screen. I really appreciate that you've shared this with me. Let me see if I can do this again. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, now let me see if this will work. Is that the same situation?
It's the same situation. In many cases, you may have to select point, like you have to point directly to the slide. On Zoom, sometimes it has where you go to advance where you're sharing, and then after you share, you'll see multiple slides, and then you've got a point. There you go. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry about that, folks. And thank you. I really thank you for not letting me go through the whole presentation like that. Okay, where were we? Let's see if I can make this advance now. Definitions. And then we will move on to what you're here for, which is to explain how the grants work. There are going to be 3 tiers of grants. And the important thing to point out here is what Kathy mentioned, that these grants are intended to be for planning and project development. They are not program or project implementation grants. And all of these are, you need not apply in order. So tier 1 is up to $150,000 for 1 year for assessment purposes. And that can include things like collecting baseline data. Tier 2, and these are up to 2-year grants of up to $250,000. And this is for planning, and that includes things like community engagement, developing plans, partnership development. And tier 3 is for project development or pilot projects, and that is pulling together blueprints, potentially even purchasing land. There's some criteria around that, but anything that you need to do to get your project up and running. There's also some overlap between all of these categories. So, but this is essentially what the grant periods are and what the focus areas are. There are also up to $75,000 of non-competitive one-year grants. These are meant for the most capacity constrained grassroots organizations, and it's intended for capacity building and also program development and planning purposes. In this case, based on who has come to our attention as the grant makers or the Thriving Communities technical assistance centers, those names will be nominated and sent to us, but there's not going to be a competitive process for those grants. For us in Region 5, our intention is to distribute these grants in the percentages that you see here, with 30% going to Native nations and Indigenous communities, 25% going to rural communities, and 45% going to urban. Of course, there's overlap, such as there are strong Native organizations in urban areas. So all of our partners will be working together to make sure that as many disadvantaged communities as possible receive support and funding. Okay, issue areas here. These are the issue areas that these pre-implementation grants can cover. Environmental health includes things like asthma, anything that is triggered by environmental conditions, either indoor or outdoor. Addressing air, soil, and water quality in healthy homes. And again, this is both thinking about indoor and outdoor toxics and other issues like lead, asbestos, pesticides. Access to healthy food. One of the areas here to focus on is reducing vehicle miles traveled. Could also address stormwater green infrastructure, emergency preparedness and disaster resiliency, or think about workforce development and green jobs training. Here are a few key points I want to make sure everyone keeps in mind as you're thinking about these grants. First, this is not a typical grant program, and the EPA and our grant makers are constrained by statute. We cannot give these as lump sum payments. Normally in a grant, if you are awarded $150,000, you get that $150,000 upfront. That is not going to be the case. We as grant makers will only be able to withdraw our own funds 5 days before we need them. And that's not true. That's true not only for us, but also for our grantees. Every region will be developing its own system for these for requesting these disbursements, and we're still trying to work that out. But it is something I want to make sure that everyone understands going into this, that there will need to be on your end a process and a plan for accessing that money, almost just in time. There is some confusion about this. Some people think it's a reimbursement process, and it need not be. You can request the funds 5 business days before you need them. However, sometimes it may be easier if by any chance you have the resources to ask for reimbursement, but it is not necessary. It's sort of both and. You can, but you need not. When you are working with consultants or contractors, we must all follow procurement policies, federal guidelines around that. So any contract over $10,000, any purchase over $10,000 requires that a bidding process, that you show that you've done some research and it's not a sole source procurement is what they call it. There are 2 levels. If your contracts are under or purchases are under $250,000, there's sort of a simplified acquisition process in which you can just show proof that you've gotten 3 bids or quotes or prices online or by email. However, if it's over 250,000, which is probably not gonna be applicable to most grantees, you'll have to go through a complete public bidding process. Finally, if your project, particularly for Tier 1, is planning to collect data, air quality data, water quality data, soil quality data, or public health data, you are going to need to develop a quality assurance plan to collect that data. And again, as regions and as national, we're working out exactly what that's going to look like, how we can support you with that. And I'm almost done here because this is my last slide. And so there's a lot, this is a lot, and we're here to help you. So one of the things though that you can start doing is that I'm sure you've heard this in a lot of places, go to, register with sam.gov. If you've got that, great. If you don't have it, we have been told that for these thriving community grants, and just for ours specifically, you can do what's called a simplified registration and apply for a unique entity ID. I'm gonna, once I get off the camera, I will put that link in the chat for you. So we encourage you to apply for that if you have not applied for the full sam.gov as soon as possible, so you have that ready to go. Prepare your accounting and record keeping systems. Sort of take a look at that because of what I mentioned related to the disbursement process, and also because the EPA requires us as grant makers to track every staff hour spent on the EPA projects, whether it's our own work or the grantees' work. Everyone needs to keep excellent records and documentation of every hour spent that's worked, every dollar spent. So as you're thinking about applying, think about your accounting and record keeping systems and how you would plan for that. Plan time to develop the program plan as well as budget. We're sort of stuck in a place where the EPA wants us to have a very simple application process that's not burdensome, and they require us to make sure that you and we are following all of these requirements related to finances, accounting, documentation, procurement, quality, data collection, etc. So that while the application itself is probably I hope will feel very light, the background planning and documentation we would like you to have to make sure that you can hit the ground running, don't run into any roadblocks, can make this process as easy as possible, will need to be in place. And we invite you to work with your regional grant makers, your regional technical assistance centers, to make sure that you have all of that in place before you even apply, so that once you get the money, you don't get stopped by someone saying, what is your plan for data collection? And for us, our timeline is that we expect to announce our first round of grants sometime this summer, and it will be a rolling process. We expect to make grant decisions 3 to 4 times a year, and we expect that the last round of grants will go out in summer of 2026. So that's just about, even though it's a 3-year grant making program, the decisions will be front loaded into the first 2 years. So as you think about your own plans, plan to submit your application by summer of 2026. We invite you to follow MinneapolisFoundation.org for updates, and also to find your own regional grant makers, follow them. Minneapolis Foundation also has partners that you can follow any of us as well. So I wasn't tracking my time, but I hope I did okay, and I will hand things off to the RTI team, unless Harriet, you saw any questions that should be answered immediately.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jumana. I did say that we would hold questions, but there was one in the chat that I thought I would go ahead and let you answer. It was about the non-competitive subgrant. Someone was asking how organizations could come to the attention of the grant makers. I think you mentioned the Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers, but if there's more that you can provide on that, that'd be great.
We're still working. Thank you for the question. We're still working out the details, but I think And I invite my RTI colleagues and any of my other Minneapolis Foundation colleagues or anyone else that's on the line that might have more information than I do. We're working out all of the details, but we do know that in the course of outreach and technical assistance, we will encounter some groups that will have extra difficulty in meeting some of these guidelines and could just use the additional support. So this sounds like it's a very incomplete answer, and maybe my RTI colleagues can offer something more there. But we're working on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm also just going to mention, you were talking about needing a SAM.gov UEI. EPN does have regular SAM.gov, grants.gov office hours to help organizations wherever you may be in the process of trying to get your registration. I'm going to put something in the chat about it, but we welcome anyone who might need assistance with that to join us for those. And so I am now going to hand things over to Dr. Pineda and Dr. Beth to provide some information on RTI's National and Region 4 Grantmakers Program. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we'll follow on the good, informative presentation. Thank you, Jumana. So my name is Daniela Pineda, and I'm here with my colleague, Christine Bevc. And can we move to the next slide? What we want to co-sign to the information that was shared, and also just share a little bit more about RTI's role, a little bit about how we are, and some of where we are in preparations for our grant maker. But I also want to take a moment before we do that, just to talk a little bit about the Thriving Communities Grant Maker program. And just thinking about how we're understanding EPA's desire is in terms of how this program is different, and what we're hoping to accomplish as a national network of grant makers. So very much the three things I will call out. It is the support of capacity building of organizations that are focused on environmental justice, and so that's done through the funding in the different tiers that were already covered. I think one thing that I would highlight, just to underscore what Jumana said, is that there are some areas that were called out in terms of funding areas, but from our interactions with EPA, they've been pretty open for communities to propose the things that they're prioritizing in their EJ space. So it is that's the anchor on capacity building. The other piece, just having the selection of grant makers as a partner to EPA in these cooperative agreements is really the focus for, I believe, for all the grant makers, is to ensure that we do this in a more efficient and timely manner, and that we have activities that complement reducing known barriers, and grapple with things that come up as organizations are learning more about the program, finding out who their regional grant maker is, and really kind of decreasing. The big goal is to decrease the time from when you submit your application to getting funds. The other last piece in terms of the Thriving Communities program generally is there is this, every grant maker will have their own program in terms of how they are operationalizing what it means to have meaningful involvement from community members. So this is another piece where there is definitely an emphasis on how this is a people-driven program from EPA's perspective, in terms of having the grant makers serve as these intermediary organizations that support a governance structure that especially includes folks who have not been traditionally included in decision-making for funding in that process. So those are the three big hallmarks. And then if you can go to the next slide. So we started talking a little bit about RTI. So we are, we're an international nonprofit research organization. We're an independent research institute, and our focus is as simple and as complicated as, we want to improve the human condition, and we do that through doing research, through doing implementation work, to providing technical assistance. With with that in mind, we do have as an institute a focus on environmental justice. And so our Transformative Research Unit for Equity does focus on environmental justice. And it's a pretty broad portfolio of, working with community-based organizations, doing research, working with different federal and private clients to think about how to support local priorities for environmental justice work. So the other thing, and I'd be remiss not to acknowledge our partner, Chandra, from SCLC and others who is actually here. We are in our program, we have a host of partners. So our work, we have both a regional focus and a national grantmaker focus. And so we are the named grant maker for Region 4, and we're also a national central grant maker for regions 5 through 7. There's a special call out for Region 7 as there's not a different regional grant maker, so we are serving in that capacity in Region 7. The partners that you see here, so the Southern Environmental Law Center, with Chandra leads their environmental justice work there. North Carolina Central University, National Center for Healthy Housing, University of Kentucky, and the International City County Management Association. There's a focus both on national organizational networks as well as regional, because in our conversations with EPA, we are serving as a Region 7 grant maker. We are in the process of building 3 additional partnerships and naming partners in Region 7 that can support that local work. So we're definitely not doing this on our own, but just wanted to share a little bit more about how we're partnering. And with that, I'll send it over to Christine to share more.
As I unmute myself. Thanks, Daniela. All right, so just this is a bit of a repeat reiteration of some of the information that Jumana also shared previously on the types of subgrants that are going to be available through this program. As she mentioned, there's 3 tiers. The assessment tiers, they're the 150,000, the planning tiers, and the development grants there in terms of the duration up to, and then also the non-competitive capacity building. One piece to add to this is that each of the grant makers will have their own application system, so how applications are received, and then how they are how the decisions are made for those are going to vary by grant maker to grant maker. So we can speak to the process in general for how that's going to unfold in Region 4, Region 7, and then we will be providing some additional funding to help fill some gaps as National Central. But we really want to encourage organizations across the regions to seek out their regional grant makers. So if you're based in Region 4, then we want to make sure that you're applying within Region 4. If you're an organization that covers more than one state, that's where it depends on the project that you're looking at, whether you're crossing over different regions from between Region 4 to Region 5. That's where we encourage you to, throughout this process, to be able to reach out, and we'll have lots of ways to be able to answer some of those questions. The other part is the types of projects that are going to be funded under these. These are very designed to really be more project-based, community-oriented projects, with some exception around the capacity building ones. And to the question about the non-competitives, for those, for Region 4, Region 7, and National, for National Central, our process is self-nomination. So just like you would apply for any of the tiers, you're also able to apply for those. It is non-competitive in the sense that you are not in a batch with other applicants. So for the tier 1 to tier 3, those are projects that are going to be reviewed externally by community reviewers, whereas the non-competitive is an application that will go straight to our community advisory boards or our national central steering committee to make some of those decisions about the set of criteria and the details of what those projects or what those awards should look like. So there is more detail that's coming out on that. We're working closely with EPA and our partners to really define what projects fit under these. So as TCGM is also an evolution of EPA's previous small grants program, we have to figure out like what exactly, how is EPA explicitly defining what could be a development project or what is going to be a planning project. And so we're hoping as we move forward in the next couple of months to be able to also offer some of the guidance to organizations to say, well, which tier should I apply for? Some of that's, being able to go through a series of quick questions and get that response to say, you're a best fit for a planning tier. And going back to Jumana's point that I'd like to reiterate is that these funding tiers are not prerequisites. So you don't need to have applied for a planning tier and received a planning award to be able to apply for a development. We are also working through some of the conflict of interest pieces because many of the decisions around these grants are really intended to be community driven. So decisions for communities by communities. RTI is really, as grant makers, our job is really to help facilitate the process and make sure that, the normal timeline for funding is not going to be months, but it's going to be something that's measured more in weeks. So the types of projects are going to inherently vary across all of the regions. There's just a couple of different project activities that are listed down below. The Healthy Homes programs, being able to look at preparedness programs, planning. They could be very focused, very specific for and related to whether there's superfunds or brownfields within your communities or CAFOs that need to be addressed. But that's going to vary. In our approach, we're looking at in total for all of the funding over the 3 years to be able to issue somewhere around 450 grants. So we're hoping to get those out. There's some variation in terms of the funding region 4, region 7, and national, but those are still to be defined and to be determined. But we do have reserve funds for Region 4 and then Region 7 also. Unfortunately, EPA didn't change our award amount when they said, hey, can you also do Region 7? So we're working with that. Next slide is eligibility of who can apply. I saw this question go through the chat about how non-501c3. One of the really key pieces here is that you do not need to have a 501c status to be able to apply. It goes by your state's designation as a nonprofit, as well as some of those other the UEI pieces and other criteria for us to be able to establish those awards. So in general, these are the large categories that EPA has set forth, focusing nonprofit, community-based grassroots organizations, also philanthropic and civic organizations that have that nonprofit status. And again, that's not 501c3, tribal governments also, or an intertribal consortia, local governments. And when we say local governments, we're not saying, like large, we don't want the city of Los Angeles to necessarily apply. We mean more of local, of smaller communities that really can help to facilitate those resources to be able to help those pass through for community efforts there. And also the Native American organizations. Who's not eligible are going to be individuals, for-profit businesses, and state governments. So again, we'll also kind of have that guidance on the site about, am I eligible? And that's also going to help feed into some of the larger, your application pieces. So we're hoping to be able to really break it down. So by the time you get into that application piece, all of your information will help to pre-populate and carry through for that process. And again, that's the process for Region 4, Region 7, and National Central. So again, those are going to vary depending upon the grant maker. So where are we? We are right with Jumana on this one in terms of we are very early on in the process. The work excuse me, the work is continuing to evolve. We're meeting with and reaching out to organizations across Regions 4 and Region 7. We're having introductions like this, where we can have those conversations, beginning to start to have our listening sessions, and then meeting with our regional and other national grant makers to help build those relationships and really start to set us up for success as a national central program. Excuse me, sorry. And then working with our partners in EPA within both Region 4 and Region 7. With Region 7, we're further behind, and I would say in terms of where our starting point is, and so we're starting a little bit further upstream with that one in terms of still working to identify our statutory partners in that process. So we're factoring that into some of the timelines. So that's also a piece of what we have here. And I'm going to pass it back to Daniela to share those key dates that everybody is always looking for as well, which again may vary depending upon the grant maker there. So Daniela?
Yeah, sure. Oh my goodness. I was like, so it is very much summer, and these are I guess seasons. So we are working to doing this standing up the program in the next few months, and then having the notice of funding go out in the summer. And then also being able to have award announcements early fall. And we will also be having rolling based applications reviews in the 3 years of the program. So we're estimating about 10 different application cycles. But that is all the, yes, thank you. So I think there was a question about, just following on the thread of the non-competitive and how can organizations be involved. So we do have, as we're working now on having dedicated websites for the regions we're supporting. In doing that, we do have a email, tcgm@rti.org. And so if you email that account, then your information will be added to our entire system so that we can then take that and put it into our internal infrastructure as we launch. And so you can sign up for the announcement of the website and any other things that our team will do. We also, through that website and through Information Blitz, we are looking to solicit input on the structure of the program. This is as every grant maker has a discretion on how they seek feedback. So we are part of how we're doing that is having focus groups. And we also, I think Christine mentioned specifically that part of our process in the community advisory boards is to have technical reviews. And technical is a very broad term here. It's not just like hard skills. It's experience doing work on the ground. So have reviewers for different parts of the application. So that's also something that you can self-nominate. And then we are working in consultation with EPA and our partners to define the criteria for select the community advisory board members. And those are the decision-making bodies for Region 4, Region 7, and then for National Central, that's a national steering committee that would actually make the funding decisions. So key here is that email address to get our information. I know we want to leave time for questions, and there's some in the chat, so I'll stop there. Maybe we can turn it back.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there are some in the chat. Harriet, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then I'll go to those in the chat. And then if people want to raise their hands and ask questions, please feel free.
Okay, I've kind of jumped the gun. I feel a bit guilty. Okay, so my question is, we're trying to think of the ways that we've got 300 members that we represent. Many of them have a tough time, they just lack the capacity to both write grants and manage them. So we're trying to think of ways to support as many members as possible. And one thinking is that we would help members form collaborations of adjacent community-based organizations, have one apply on behalf of that collaboration and do a standard application that is a planning grant that they could kind of cut and paste whether or not it might want to be around climate resilience or contamination or, you know, EJ issues, so that, and so I guess standardize the process and then help form collaborations. Is there any reason either of you could think that that might be a bad idea? Is there anything that you would recommend?
I think the piece on that one is that we want to make sure that as the applications are coming in, that they're really emphasizing those community oriented focus. So if they're, there's the providing the structure and a template, which is really great to have as a starting point there, and saying what questions do you need to answer as you're going through and preparing your application, and we want to make sure that all the review criteria that are going to drive some of these decisions are also clearly communicated as well. So then as those applications are prepared and the questions that you would put into those templates are available to applicants to be able to respond to. So then we can really quickly see, like, for reviewers, they can say, oh, well, what community, what types of populations will this be impacting? What are the issues that they'll be looking at? Has there been previous work that's been done? And I will pause there, and also Daniela and Jumana to
Yeah, I don't
add to
know if
that too.
I raised my hand, but I don't know if there's that chat function, but I would, the only, I guess, one other I would underscore is not a bad strategy. I think that, you know, that makes sense. Efficiency and also just sharing knowledge. I think the understanding the program for your regional grant maker, or if it's an application where you're applying to a national partner, understanding their program would be the most, that's where the tailoring comes in, right? We certainly want to look for we're invested in getting the money out the door. So we need to, you know, none of us can be successful as grant makers if we don't make the process accessible. So I think, to your point, it's not a bad idea. And I think that it's just more of understanding what those criteria are. And just thinking about what is the best fit for that project. So it might be your regional, it might be a collaboration with another organization. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. There was a question in the chat, and this person may want to come on and clarify a little bit. It was asking for more explanation about, I believe, like data collection, like, you know, air, soil, water, investigative type projects. Was there a specific question? If you want to come off mute and add anything more to that, you're welcome.
Hi, my name is Daryl Haddock, and I'm in Atlanta. And we're working on a collaboration with several colleges and universities to do air, soil, and water community science efforts. I'm wondering, is there something that we should kind of take back to the institutes of higher education to pursue this collective type of community science work? Because we need to fund the work, and they want to do the work on behalf of community-based organizations. We've created some language around the higher institutions not being extractive, but we haven't figured out the sources of funding to put the project together. So I'm wondering if you could, I think it was mainly the first speaker mentioned community air, soil, and water projects. I'm wondering if I could hear a little bit more that I could take back to those partners, and perhaps we have them or collect, or we collaborate on the submission for the grant.
Well, I can jump in, and I very much welcome my partners because I think in some ways we're workshopping our answers to these questions as we go through and finalize the project. So Daryl, in this situation, the tier 1, the baseline data is intended for you to be embedded in sort of a longer term project. So I think working with partners makes good sense. I think working with partners that have the capacity to do these quality assurance plans and the data collection that's in line with how EPA wants them is great. What is not clear to me right now is if and how you mention university partners in your application specifically. And I'm going to keep saying this, and it's I wish I had something more, but work with your regional grant makers. I think all of us understand there are so many different questions, and we want to answer them specific to your particular needs. So my only thought is that it sounds like a perfect application for this. And we're still not exactly sure because there are all of these requirements around procurement, partnerships, contracts, what the best guidance for you is and how to mention that in your application.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll pursue that with the university partners and hopefully reach out to you all in Region 4.
But Daniela, Christine, do you have differing or additional thoughts there?
Thank you. So I think the definitely correct. And the other, just thinking about, it sounds like you're already thinking about this in terms of the collaboration, right? Just from a like the strategy to apply, right? Like if it makes sense, or if it's like what would that the having either the college or university add to, right? And also just thinking about their costs and the budgets, because even though these are significant funding, if you look at the grants, just thinking about that, like does adding that partner really allow you to do the work and also have, like, the budget for that? I guess I don't think I think that's just a general consideration. But yeah, there's nothing, I mean, if it sounds like, I mean, if it makes sense, from the works perspective, I mean, it sounds like there's nothing that says you can't do that. So, I think, yeah, understanding and also reaching out, send us an email to the tcgm@rti.org so you can be part of our, in the infrastructure we're building for sending out and sharing more about the region. So yeah, that's what I would add. But thank you for the question.
Karina, go ahead, please.
Hello. Quick question. Do you all have any examples of what the healthy home projects they're considering, and what the focus is on healthy homes?
I was like, Daniela, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think, so let me just make sure I'm understanding the question. So one of our partners in Region 4 is the National Center for Healthy Housing, and that was on the slide. Is the question in reference to that partnership? I just want to make sure I'm not left field with the answer. Oh,
Sorry, I muted myself. Sorry about that. One of the considerations was like healthy homes, local emergency preparedness, disaster resiliency program. So I'm thinking more along that line. Like, what
thank you.
are they?
Yeah, no, yeah, I just want to make sure I was in about the partner. Yeah, we really, in the notice of funding that we responded to, they were really, some of the things that Jumana mentioned are named examples in that solicitation. And when we've had conversations with the EPA, each of the grant makers has their own program officer or team of program officers. It's really felt very open into that. So the short answer is no, we don't have any examples of specific projects, but I think there's a real openness to having organizations propose their local priorities. I think that one of the things that we heard very clearly is that that's not a, sorry, what is the word I'm looking for? There's not an exhaustive list of, but fortunately, we wouldn't be able to provide any specific examples.
Okay, and then is there
Oh,
not, go ahead.
Just on this point, I think each of us will be working with these regional advisory committees to kind of clarify for our regions what this means. But the other point is that it's upon us as grant makers to make sure that there is covering of a variety of issue areas. So that doesn't actually answer your question, other than that we know that we'll be doing our best to get the resources out. And as was just mentioned, that if you propose something that's in alignment, that we want to try to fund as many, what's important to you. So our regional advisory committee and the applications themselves will inform us as to what the needs are.
Did you have a follow-up that you?
No, thank you. Other than, and I think you've already said that you don't have any examples or prior grantees, so it kind of is open. We are located in somewhat of a rural area. There are a number of people in mobile homes, and so I was just trying to figure out if there were some prior examples, but that you answered my question, that at this point we don't know.
You may also look over at the past projects that have been funded under the small grants program, which is the predecessor program to this. Those were much smaller at 75,000, but there may be some healthy home related or adjacent projects in that space that you could look for those examples. There's about 750 of those, but they should be filterable, and you can kind of tease some of those out. Also reach out. We can connect you over, as I mentioned, with Region 6 to help with those pieces. And then the additional piece to add to this is that these grants are also kind of a stepping stone for the future. So they're very short in terms of 1 year versus 2 year, and being able to set communities up to pursue larger funding opportunities so that that may be healthy home focused grant opportunities, is that you have the pieces in place to pursue those larger projects and initiatives and efforts that where the costs are really going to exceed 350. But we have the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers that are also going to be helping with that.
Yeah, and
Can you share that link to the prior program? That would be helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I thank you. And I would just underscore additionally that because that program, so if you do have the time to go look at the prior awards, because basically the program is a new national program for EPA. So I would imagine that that's a good starting point, but I also wouldn't limit your ideas to if it's not something on there, because they are pretty open about what could be funded, and they're, a lot of how they're our connections to them as grant makers is really thinking about how do we showcase and how do we connect to the national network of grant makers and like what's possible. So, but yes, Christine, that's a great point. There are those from a prior program that there might be some examples there, but for this program, because it's a new national program, there are no examples that exist officially for this program.
Yeah, and one other thought is that as we're putting together our grant application, there's a lot of space for you to tell us tell us about your community, what's a priority for your community, and what is the EJ nature, environmental justice nature, and the benefit to the disadvantaged community. So we've been given a lot of space with which to work. There are not hard guidelines, not very many, in terms of the issue areas. So we really hope that you will have a chance to explain that, and that we won't be like forcing people into very small boxes here.
Great. Does anyone else in the next couple of minutes that we have left have a question that they would like to ask? Harriet, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think I saw this in the chat, but just to confirm, does it seem as though each of the grant makers is treating that 75K category a little different? Each of them are deciding their own way of how to distribute the funds.
Yeah, everybody applied and put together a proposal. But it seems so far that we wouldn't know the details of all of the other grant makers, but from our experience, it seems like they're slightly different. Mhm.
Kristen, please go ahead.
You're on mute.
Thank you. I was curious about what was said by Jumana about the bidding process for subcontracts, etc. If our plan was to work with a few local organizations and work together, and we want to work together because we know already who's doing the really good and important work and who's most connected to the community. Can we apply, if instead of then having one of us apply and everybody else be a subcontractor, could we apply as a group? So that way we wouldn't have to do the bidding and waste people's time.
I hope the answer to that question is yes. Daniela and Christine, do you have a response to that? And the reason I'm a little bit hesitant, Kristen, is that we've run into challenges unexpectedly with our own partnership about, you know, how we can manage that and who fits under sub-award rules. So I'm always surprised at a requirement that pops up. Christine and Daniela, do you know the answer to that question?
We do not, unfortunately. So
Great question that we're going to take back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that if we go by what we're being asked to do, if there is a signed or like a partnership agreement, you will likely still have to have a lead applicant. And if you can sort of show a part, this is what I'm assuming based on how they've asked us to operate, that the partners though have a formal agreement of some sort, and that you have to share the resources with everybody in that agreement. They can't be, and I think that was to get around some exploitation around, you know, having some small groups included, but then not getting the money at the end. So if we go by that example, the answer will likely be yes, but you have to have a lead, but those partners need to be, you know, have some sort of agreement.
So that then those partners could be included as subs within the grant application and wouldn't be subject to the bidding process? Or they still would?
No, I think if that premise is true, and please, I know it's being recorded, but I think I can't guarantee that it's true. You would not need to bid out that piece.
Okay.
If whatever the process is for confirming the partnership, if that's agreed upon, you wouldn't have to bid it out. But if it is a contract, a consultant, a big purchase, that's when those other things hit.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. It looks like we're at time. I want to say thank you so much to Jumana and Daniela and Christine for this information today. It's incredibly helpful. We completely understand that things are not completely solidified for you and that, you know, things may be subject to change, but any information to sort of start thinking and planning is just incredibly helpful. Yeah, so thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everyone who joined. We really appreciate that. And we, again, are open to suggestions in the future for forums and information that you'd like to see. So please don't hesitate to reach out.